For almost 40 years, this man ran the most trusted money machine on Wall Street. Kings and movie stars, Nobel laureates, banks, universities, entire charities. They didn't just invest with him, they begged him to take their money. And he never lost. Every year, in every kind of market, the returns came in like clockwork. That was the whole trick. Because there was no machine. There was no trading. There was only the largest lie in the history of finance, $65 billion that never existed. Today, we put Bernie Madoff on the table. Because what he stole wasn't just money, it was the one thing Wall Street runs on. And the man who tried to stop him saw the whole thing coming, 9 years early, and nobody would listen. Let's begin the autopsy. To understand how one man fooled the smartest people in the world, you have to go back to the beginning, to a lifeguard with $5,000 and something to prove. Bernard Lawrence Madoff was born in Queens, New York, in 1938. He was not born rich. He put himself through college, and in 1960, he took $5,000. He'd saved, installing sprinklers, and working as a lifeguard, and he started his own firm. He called it Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. And here's the part almost nobody remembers. For decades, the real business was legitimate and brilliant. Madoff was an early believer that computers could match buyers and sellers faster than men shouting on a trading floor. His firm helped pioneer the electronic trading that would one day become the NASDAQ stock market. He was so respected that he served as chairman of the NASDAQ 3 separate times. Think about what that means. This wasn't some back-alley con man. This was one of the most important figures on Wall Street. He advised the government on how markets should work. He sat on the boards that wrote the rules. When regulators wanted to understand the future of trading, they called Bernie Madoff. And that reputation was the most valuable thing he owned. Because somewhere along the way, Madoff started a second business, quietly, upstairs. Not the trading floor, everyone could see a private investment operation, run on a separate floor of his office, behind a locked door. The 17th floor of a building on 3rd Avenue in Manhattan. If you were lucky enough to get in, the pitch was simple, and it was irresistible. Madoff would manage your money. He wouldn't promise you the moon, no wild get-rich-quick numbers that might scare a smart investor off. He promised something better, something steadier. Around 10 to 12% a year, every year, smooth as glass. Good markets, bad markets, crashes, booms, it didn't seem to matter. The money just went up, in a clean, straight line. No stomach-churning drops, no bad years. Just a quiet, reliable climb that never, ever stopped. To the people who got in, it felt like they'd found a secret door, a private club. Madoff even played hard to get. He would sometimes turn investors away, tell them he was full, make them feel lucky to be allowed in at all. And nothing sells like the thing you're afraid you can't have. So the money poured in. From country clubs in Palm Beach, from Jewish charities and foundations who trusted one of their own, from European banks that fed him billions, from celebrities, hedge funds, and thousands of ordinary retirees who put their entire life savings on the 17th floor. On paper, Bernie Madoff was managing tens of billions of dollars and paying flawless returns to tens of thousands of people. He had a penthouse, a yacht, homes on 2 continents. He was the definition of a safe pair of hands, the one guy on Wall Street who would never blow up. There was just one problem. It was all fake. Every statement, every number, every dollar of profit. And the higher he climbed, the more impossible it became to ever climb back down. So, how do you pay 10% to thousands of people every year without ever actually making a profit? You don't. You do something far simpler and far older. It's called a Ponzi scheme. Here's the entire trick in one sentence. You take money from new investors, and you use it to pay the old ones. That's it. There's no strategy. There's no genius. When grandma wants her yearly return, you just hand her a slice of the fresh money that walked in the door yesterday, and you tell her it's profit. As long as more money keeps coming in than goes out, the machine runs forever, and everyone thinks they're getting rich. Madoff told his clients he was using something called a split-strike conversion strategy, a real technique full of complicated-sounding options trades, the kind of thing that makes a normal person nod and stop asking questions. But behind the locked door, almost none of it was happening. Investigators would later find that for years, the trades simply weren't being made. the money wasn't in the market at all. It mostly sat in a bank account, waiting to be shuffled from one victim to the next. To keep the illusion alive, his team generated mountains of fake paperwork, account statements showing trades that never happened, profits that never existed. Some were even backdated. They'd look at what the market had already done, then invent winning trades after the fact, so the returns always looked perfect. And the operation behind all this fiction was almost laughably small. On that locked 17th floor, a tiny, isolated team fed numbers into an old computer that churned out the phony statements. A paper factory, humming away, while the world imagined a sophisticated trading desk hard at work upstairs. Madoff didn't even reach most of his victims directly. He had helped so-called feeder funds. These were investment firms that gathered money from thousands of their own clients, funneled all of it into Madoff, and collected a fat fee for the privilege. Some sent him billions. To the families whose money it was, they'd simply invested with a respectable, boring fund. They had no idea that every dollar they owned ended up behind that one locked door. Before we open this one up any further, subscribe and hit the bell. Because on this channel, no fortune is too big, and no name too trusted to end up on this table. And trust me, the cause of death is never the one you'd guess. Now, you might be thinking, how did nobody catch this? He was regulated. He was famous. The government literally knew his name. Surely, someone checked. Someone did. His name was Harry Markopolos. He was a financial analyst in Boston, and his own bosses had asked him a simple question. This Madoff guy is paying steady returns. Like clockwork. Can you build a product that does the same thing? So Markopolos sat down with Madoff's numbers to reverse engineer them. And within hours, he realized something that made his blood run cold. It was impossible. Not unlikely. Not suspicious. Mathematically, impossible. The returns Madoff reported climbed in a near-perfect straight line, year after year, with almost no losing months across more than a decade. Real markets don't move like that. Nothing moves like that. Markopolos later said it was like a baseball player hitting 960 for the season, a number so absurd that anyone who understood the game would know the scorecard was faked. He dug deeper, and it got worse. The strategy Madoff claimed to use relied on options, and Markopolos calculated there weren't even enough of those options in existence, in the entire market, for Madoff to be doing what he said he was doing. The trades couldn't be real, because the market wasn't big enough to hold them. So, in the year 2000, Harry Markopolos went to the government. He handed the Securities and Exchange Commission his evidence and told them, in plain words, that Bernie Madoff was running a fraud. And they did nothing. So he went back and back. He rewrote his findings, sharpened them, and in 2005, he delivered his most damning report yet. He gave it a title that left no room for confusion. The world's largest hedge fund is a fraud. Inside, he laid out around 30 separate red flags, a roadmap to the whole crime, handed to regulators on a plate, and still nothing. For 9 years, Markopolos warned them. 9 years. The SEC looked into Madoff, sort of, and each time walked away convinced there was nothing there. Because how could there be? He was Bernie Madoff. He'd run the NASDAQ. Men like that don't steal. One thing before we cut deeper. If this autopsy's got you hooked, hit that like button. It's how YouTube decides whose fortune ends up on this table next. And here's my question for you. You've now seen the same red flag the experts saw: returns that never, ever go down. If that had been your money, would you have pulled it out? Or told yourself you'd finally found the safe bet? Drop it in the comments. Because what happens next is the part almost nobody saw coming, and it's the exact flaw that brought the whole thing crashing down. That flaw was built into the scheme from the start. A Ponzi scheme has one fatal weakness: it can never stop growing. Madoff didn't just need new money, he needed more new money. Every year, forever, just to pay the promises he'd already made. The moment more cash tried to leave than came in, the whole thing would die. For decades, he got away with it, because the money kept flowing and almost nobody asked for it all back at once. Why would they? Their statements said they were rich. Their returns were perfect. Leaving the club made no sense. And then, in 2008, the entire world economy caught fire. When the financial crisis hit in 2008, markets fell apart, and people who were losing money everywhere else did the one thing Madoff could not survive. They came to get their cash. The machine had finally run out of new victims. Investors began asking to withdraw their money, not a trickle, but billions of dollars, all at once. By that autumn, requests to pull out had piled up to around $7 billion. And Bernie Madoff, The safest pair of hands on Wall Street, the man managing tens of billions, didn't have it. He never had. The vault was empty, and the fresh money that used to refill it had dried up when the panic began. In early December, Madoff knew it was over. He called his two sons, Mark and Andrew, into his apartment. Both of them worked at the firm on the legitimate trading side, the part that was real. And there, Bernie confessed. He told them the investment business, the thing that had made the family name, was one big lie. He said it was all a giant Ponzi scheme, and that he was finished. He figured he owed clients around $50 billion. His sons listened to their father admit to the largest fraud in history, and then they turned him in. The next morning, federal agents arrived at his apartment. When an FBI agent told him they were there about the fraud, Madoff didn't fight it. He simply said there was no innocent explanation. When the accountants finally pulled the scheme apart, the scale of it broke records. The account statements Madoff had mailed out claimed his clients held nearly $65 billion. That money was pure fiction. The actual cash that real people had handed him and lost their true principal came to roughly $18 billion. And the victims weren't just billionaires who could afford it. Around 37,000 people in over 100 countries were caught in it. Retirees who lost every cent. Charities that had to close their doors overnight. Families whose savings simply vanished between one day and the next. The names on that victim list were staggering. The charitable foundation of Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Peace Prize winner and Holocaust survivor, was almost wiped out, and Wiesel himself called Madoff one word: a psychopath. Foundations that had done good work for decades folded within weeks. Universities, pension funds, and thousands of quiet, ordinary retirees who had wanted nothing more than a safe place to park their savings were left holding paper that was worth exactly nothing. In March of 2009, Bernie Madoff pleaded guilty to 11 federal felonies. He offered no defense. On June 29th, a judge sentenced him to 150 years in prison, the maximum, a number meant to speak for every life he'd wrecked. But the cruelest damage wasn't in the courtroom. Exactly 2 years after his father's arrest, to the very day, Madoff's son Mark took his own life. His other son, Andrew, died of cancer a few years later, having said the stress of his father's crime helped kill him. Bernie Madoff himself died in prison in 2021, at the age of 82, never having walked free again. There is one strange, almost hopeful twist in all that wreckage. A court-appointed trustee named Irving Picard spent more than a decade hunting the money down. He couldn't recover profits that never existed, so instead he went after the people who had pulled cash out before the collapse, and forced them to return their fake gains so the pot could be shared with those who truly lost. It worked far better than anyone expected. Piece by piece, Picard clawed back more than $14 billion. And by the end of 2024, most victims had recovered the overwhelming majority of the real money they'd put in. The fortune Madoff invented was gone forever. But much of the money that had actually been real, slowly, quietly, found its way home. So let's close this one up. The official cause of death was a Ponzi scheme. But that's not what really killed all those fortunes. The true cause of death was trust. Trust that stopped asking questions. Bernie Madoff's greatest asset was never a trading strategy. It was his reputation. And a reputation big enough can switch off the part of a smart person's brain that says, check this. Look at the pattern on the table, because you'll see it again. Flag 1. Returns that only ever go up. In the real world, every honest investment loses sometimes. A line that climbs smoothly, year after year, with no bad months, isn't a miracle, it's a warning. Flag 2. A story too complicated to check, told by a name too trusted to question. Madoff hid an empty vault behind a locked door and a fancy phrase, and dared people to feel stupid for asking what was inside. Flag 3. The whistle that everyone ignores. Harry Markopolos handed the authorities the answer 9 years early, in writing, and was waved away because the accused was too important to be a criminal. And here's the uncomfortable part. These flags never went away. Every few years, a new genius appears with impossibly steady returns, a story nobody quite understands, and a reputation that makes doubt feel rude. The names change, the pattern doesn't. The next empty vault is always being built somewhere, behind a locked door, waiting for the money to stop coming in. So here's my question for you. Of these 3 red flags, which one have you spotted in something you were told was a sure thing? Tell me in the comments. That's this autopsy closed. The next fortune on the slab is already on your screen, and if you want to be in the room when it hits the table, Subscribe. New autopsy every week. The money's already waiting.